Dr. Patrick Mwinde is an economist and financial expert. He is here with us alongside BILLOW KERROW, who is a former chair of the Senate Finance and Budget Committee, who is also a former shadow finance minister in the National Assembly. They're both here. We're talking about the Hustler Fund, and it's called the Financial Inclusion Fund. Dr. Mwinde, good morning.
Good morning.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Thank you very much for joining us as well, BILLOW.
Pleasure.
Always good to have you.
Thank you.
Listening to that proverb, Patrick, it is from Guinea. The man who, say it again.
The man on his feet
Yes.
comes for the share of the man sitting down.
Wow.
What's the interpretation of that?
Probably I would imagine if I control something, if I have something I own, then you need to come to me for you to be able to get a share of that. So probably I control the resource and you need it. So you need to come to where I am.
Trust an economist.
To look at it differently.
Yeah, to interpret this thing and bring it down to the basics of resources, scarce resources that need to be planned for, and so who gets what. Well, that entire discipline is actually based on that, is it not? Okay.
It's about scarcity.
Yes.
It's resources and distribution
Yes.
of the same.
Yes.
Yes.
BILLOW, what do you interpret from that proverb?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on proverbs, but when you talk of a man standing and another one sitting, and the one standing coming up for the share of,
The one sitting.
well, I look at it differently.
How differently?
I look at it as the big man coming for whatever little the poor guy sitting down has, or something like that. But,
Once again, trust a politician to interpret it.
See big and small man.
Yes, exactly.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah.
28th, we've been talking about, all right, so the president, while he was campaigning as candidate William Ruto, and the Kenya Kwanza coalition, they said, we want to establish a fund and call it the Hustler Fund. Kusaidia yule mtu mdogo aweze kujimudu kufanya biashara yake. Kama ni yule jamaa anauza miwa pale kwa stage, ama mama mboga, ama mtu fundi wa cherehani, wote wapate usaidizi wa kufanya biashara. They called it the Hustler Fund. When they got into office, of course, the pressure and the expectation was very high that this Hustler Fund was the main thing that we would expect from you. So the president had first said in December, we're going to have the Hustler Fund. Now the cabinet has actually said 30th of November, we launch the Hustler Fund. The CS for the National Treasury, Professor Jogona, has released the draft regulations on the Hustler Fund, talking about the Hustler Fund and how the shape it's going to take. It's basically 4 products in one, and how you can access the personal finance, and how then the MSMEs, and how much the fund is going to be. Now we read today in the papers that they've even looked at those regulations again and edited the regulations. They've removed the initial cap of 50 billion shillings and said it's Parliament that shall determine how much goes into this fund or any other sources that get into the fund. There's still a lot to explain though. But Patrick, what do you understand from the regulations that have been published, what the government has said so far about the Hustler Fund? How's it going to look like?
I think as of now, we're not sure what form it's taken, because we need to go back to what they promised. If you look at the commitment they had made in the manifesto, the Hustler manifesto, they had promised 50 billion annually. So the promise was annual. When the regulations came out, they said it would be Parliament 50, capped at 50. But then it has kept on shifting, it has kept on changing. If you look at the regulation, initially, if you look at the manifesto, they said they'll use existing financial frameworks. They talked about SACCOs, they talked about venture capital, they talked about equity fund. But when the regulations have come up, they seem to be shifting a bit in as much as they are retaining those financial institutions. But I think it's not coming in a vacuum, because we have had funds before. We have had the youth fund, we have had the women fund, and the WESO fund. Now, when you go through the regulations that they have issued, you don't see anything fundamentally different from what we have. And the question is, why are we establishing a new fund when the existing one still have the framework, the system, and the structures? Because like you look at the target group, they talk about groups, organized teams, and all that. If you go to the youth fund, women fund, and WESO fund, you still require the same groups, the same table banking groups. You need the same processes of registration and everything. So now you're asking, what is new in this new fund? What is unique? Probably the unique thing here to me is the volume of the amount of money talked about. I know many of us, when we talk about the 50 billion, it looks like small money until you look at it within the government spending frameworks.
Yeah.
Like now, if you look at the immediate budget that we've just we're implementing, the university fund is given 91.2 billion. If you go to free primary education, it gets in 12 billion. If you go to help, it's getting 15.8 billion. So when you're talking about 50 billion, putting it in the context of government spending program, it's a lot of money. And I don't think cumulatively the youth fund, women fund, and the WESO fund have actually ever received a total of 50 billion. So it's a colossal sum of money.
What is the, just estimating, what's the total sum that in the past, the three funds that you've mentioned, cumulatively, how much have they received?
The data is not consolidated, but when you look at WESO fund has been the largest in recent times. They were given a total of 7.02 billion. So that's the total fund that WESO fund has given.
Total.
Yes.
And
for
this
the
is
last
since 2014.
Yes.
2013, 2014.
Yes. They've only distributed 7.2 billion.
Wow.
So when you're talking about 50 billion,
is a lot.
it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And putting it in a single fund, and especially when you're starting a new entity, putting it in the context of the economy, you want to sit back and ask, like, how many companies in Kenya are doing a turnover of 50 billion? How many companies in Kenya are doing a turnover of 50 billion?
There are very few.
Very few companies doing a turnover. So when you're talking about this fund, it's a huge fund.
Sure. What would be the rationale between coming up with this? I mean, one would shudder to think that it was just, a fly-by-night kind of decision whereby it was, all right, well, let's have a fund where Kenyans can borrow from. One would hope that some thought was put behind it. So if that was the case, and also coming from you, BILLOW, what would be the rationale behind such a fund? If you've never seen one of its nature and stature as well, why come up with that and that number in the manner in which it is currently constituted?
My take is a bit different. I look at this thing as nothing more than a state-run Fuliza. Nothing, not much different. It's much ado about nothing, really. The government, of course, the cabinet in its memo said it's revolutionary. It's going to do away with all the predatory
lending practices
and so forth. And there's a lot of lofty statements about it, but it amounts to nothing really, as far as I'm concerned. I look at it differently. The reason is because both at the time, the amount of money that is being given. Don't look at the size of the 50 billion. That's nothing compared to Fuliza alone gave out 585 billion in 2021. Not to add Mshwari and add the KCB one, it's the kind of money that people have been giving. So for the government, 50 billion, even if you give each person the maximum of 50,000, how many people will get it? It's only 1 million people will get it. If you look at how many Kenyans are jobless, and we're told this is supposed to help people, who are jobless, people who are down there looking for small and micro enterprises, and so forth. The registered micro and small and medium enterprises alone with that authority are over 7.5 million. Those who are registered with those guys alone. And you create all that expectation that the government is going to give people money to create jobs so that everyone can fend for himself. And then you talk of 50 billion. I think in my view, and then you set up something that will really exclude the entire micro. If we look at the definition of the micro and small and medium enterprises, they're excluded by this fund. Because you're looking at those businesses where the minimum is 500,000, people who do at least turnover 500,000. Who employ at least 10 people, and going up to 100 million. If you are doing a 1 million shilling business or 2 million shillings business, and you're told you'll be given a hustler fund of 10,000 shillings, because majority of people will not get the maximum.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be most
Yeah.
people will get 10, 20,000 shillings. 10, 20,000 shillings is not going to be something that you would really feel it's going to change or to expand your business, because they said it's going to be used for expanding businesses. And they listed it in that fund regulation. They said small and micro enterprises, SACCOs and chamas, and I mean, those guys you can't do much with. The only people who might benefit from this money are the people who are already on Fuliza, who will find the rate of interest is lower on this one compared to Fuliza, because Fuliza would charge you, if you are taking anywhere between 25 to 50,000 shillings, they will charge you 25 shillings a day. That will probably, if you are taking about 50,000 shillings, that will come to about 18% in a year. This one, you're going to get it at 8%, and probably another 5-6% you're going to save. So there isn't an awful lot of difference, especially if you are taking that kind of 50,000. But so in my view, yes, it's and the reason why what Wendy said about the other funds, by the way, the other funds, I was just looking at the total amount of money that has been taken for the women and the youth and all other government funds, combined for the last 15 years. It's less than 35 billion.
Yeah.
15 years. And the reason is clear. One, the amounts are too small. Two, the requirements, eligibility requirements for you to register, as groups, as this, as that. And then, so they have not been very useful. I mean, but for most it is because of the size and the mode of disbursement. This is why they have moved very fast, these guys now. They've changed the last couple of months from you're going to register, you're going to do this,
Right.
but now it is Fuliza. You just go to the phone and apply the same way you apply for the other one, and we'll give it to you, So that's
What is it that
Why do
people
you
are
think
looking
that
for?
is? Yeah.
What are people looking for? Because it sounds like, if you look at this, yes, it's a Fuliza, but why was Fuliza also very popular? Why has Fuliza become very popular?
the ease of getting money. The access,
Ease of access.
accessibility. That was the most important.
Okay.
You don't waste a minute. In 1 minute, you get your money. 10,000, 20,000,
Already you have it.
you have it.
If you look at the information that we've gotten from Safaricom, from the banks that they use, the KCB, the NCBA, and then also from the Central Bank of Kenya, from Equity, about that micro lending on a short-term basis. It's basically like operating capital for small businesses. You go to borrow money at about 3 a.m. and then you pay that money by 10 p.m. And they have noticed that this is a big thing. So if the hustler gets this access to this money at 8%, which unlike the others which are offering at a different percentage, isn't that helping these businesses grow? It's keeping them afloat. It's helping them get that money that they need. You need this operating capital on a daily basis, so you're getting it.
It depends on the business that's going to help. I've said that. It's going to help those small businesses. I have in fact looked at it and said, okay, if you are doing vegetables, you are a for you to get a few
To buy stock for the day.
Stocks for the day, 10, 20,000, that will help for you. If you are, doing your shoe shine, you have a stand out there,
Yep.
it can help you. But if you are doing any of those people who are doing micro, small, medium, those who are doing those kind of businesses, small, what we call small businesses, 10, 20,000 shillings is not going to make an awful lot of difference. Yeah. But if they do one thing, make the accessibility easy, just like Fuliza ones, completely. You have access without any stress. And then number two, you don't have any strict eligibility requirements, because that's the good thing with this is the funds. Whether you're using it to pay your school fees or giving it to your wife is not an issue. Nobody wants to know what you do with your money you're borrowing.
Sure.
So we don't know where it goes.
As long as you pay.
As long as you pay back. This one, the focus is it should be for business. Yeah. So then, if they remove all those requirements and make it simply like Fuliza, then I could say I'm using it for business, and tomorrow I use it for a trip to go home. I think if you look at it for those businesses, but it's not going to help the objective of the objective was, you remember when the president used to campaign, he used to tell you, our vijana tutapatia wajira. So for you to take 30,000, 20,000 shillings and then employ somebody else because you've got some more money for capital, it's not going to be that easy. Yeah,
So you're saying it's not going to be able to help these small businesses grow?
To grow, no. And create and give them opportunities to recruit more people and employ more people.
You cannot scale.
I don't think that is the kind of money most of the small businesses were looking at.
You
small
cannot
businesses
scale.
were looking at serious money.
If you are a mamamboga, you will remain a mamamboga. All you have is you have better, easier access to.
Easier rate of repayment. The rate
money
will be cheaper than what you would have taken from Fuliza. Yes, that's the only difference.
You know what Monsignor is saying is exactly very true, because if you look at the NCB statements, you're talking about January to September, ending this year. Okay, the report that they took on the 24th of November, Fuliza and Mshwari, they disbursed 521 billion. Okay, 461 was Fuliza, 60B was Mshwari. So already that is 10 times what had been proposed by the government. So now, in essence, I can now see the question you're asking. So how exactly is this government one going to work when already we have evidence that more money than what they're talking about has been used by probably the very same people that they're trying to reach? What impact is it going to make?
Yeah, I think there are a bit of constraints here. One, this is a public fund. So if these are public money, they are going to have a challenge of law, because you can't spend public money without the frameworks of the Public Financial Management and the Public Procurement Act. So that would be one challenge. But I'm also thinking they are making a huge assumptions, or we are making a huge assumptions that there was a vacuum. Like when we say we are targeting groups, these are the table banking, we are assuming there is a vacuum, and we are not asking why did this table banking become so robust? Why are there so many? Because there was a vacuum of access. So if you go to the markets, for example, you go to Kikomba, you go to any urban and peri-urban area in the country, people already put themselves in groups and they're doing table banking. So they're mobilizing money among themselves and on lending to one another. And then the Asla Fund seems to assume that these people were lacking access. You see, economics has no vacuum. The fact that there was no formal access to financing for this group of people, they created a solution. You see, and when you look at the regulation, it's talking about these groups. But these groups are already mobilized among themselves. Now, these guys are not in the banking system. They do it among themselves in the market.
Yeah.
For example, if now you go to the Kikomba in the morning, they're even the Shylocks, hold on money in the morning, and then you pay back in the evening. So people already created a solution to the problem of unbanking and access to form of financing. So this is one of the big assumptions that they're making. But more so, they're moving to a space where they are competing with now the banks and the mobile-based platforms. And I think that's what BILLOW KERROW is talking about. Now, what will make me choose the ASLA fund and not Fuliza? If I'm required, and unless they change the regulations, as we're saying, it will be very hard for you to access that fund. Because one of the eligibility criteria is that you must be a registered group by the relevant government authority. Now, these women groups, these table banking groups, they operate in an informal environment. And this is not because there's a problem, because the economy has a problem itself. Because the economy is about 83% informal. So these are a lot of people. And you'll go to the ASLA manifesto, they actually identified and flagged this to be about 10 million people who are in the informal sector. So it doesn't mean that they're not moving money. They are moving money. It's only that the money is outside the formal economic system. They do not go to the bank. They meet every maybe Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, and they share this kind of money. I can give you a very good example. Like last year, around December, I went to somewhere in a village in Kalama, and there was a women group that is moving about 5 million annually. These are the groups we're talking about. They are deep in the village.
How many members does it have?
Active members, there are about 60 of them.
And the source of their funds is?
The table banking.
Yes, the table
They're
banking.
doing table banking. They raise the money they on-lend to themselves.
To one another.
And they're actually been able to create even products among that kind of fund. If you go to my salon yesterday, we were talking. They're meeting every Wednesday and they raise 200 shillings per person. and they're also having the separate investment fund. So when we say these guys have no access, yes, it's true they have no access, but in the formal system. Informally, they have their own systems. And I think this is what at policy level we need to be very careful not to make a sweeping assumption that these guys have no access. For me, for example, and this data we're looking from the M-Swari and all that, they borrow between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. These guys, at that time, they're in the market. Okay? So if I want to access the ASLA fund, will I be able to access it within that window where the banks and the other financial institutions have already built a niche? And they build a niche. So how will we compete in that space?
Let's take a break. You know, as you're saying all those things, Patrick,
Yeah.
remember that this one mantra by the Kenya Kwanza Coalition could be argued to have contributed a lot to the support that the Kenya Kwanza Coalition got.
Yes.
Which means that they spoke the language which addressed a need. Was there a gap? I don't know. Was there a need? Was there something that people felt that, yes, this one actually touches on what we have? Probably. And let's look at that after we take a break. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's the Situation Room. It's 8:30. We are here with Dr. Patrick Mwinde. He's an economist and a financial expert, and BILLOW KERROW, former senator and also a financial expert, a former chair of the Senate Finance and Budget Committee, also former shadow minister for finance in the National Assembly. We're talking about the Financial Inclusion Fund, aka the Hustler Fund. It's going to be launched on Wednesday. What is it all about? How is it going to work? How is it going to benefit us? We'll be back shortly.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
So last week, but one, was it last week? Yeah. The CS for cooperatives and MSMEs, the Honorable Simon Chelugui, who will be in charge of the Hustler Fund, released a statement explaining how it's going to work. So number one, he said, the Hustlers Fund will lend to businesses at 8% a year, the lowest interest ever charged in Kenya. As a result, citizens will be able to start or boost their hustles without being crushed by predatory lenders, Shylocks, and over-the-roof interest rates. There will be 4 products in the Hustler Fund. 1, personal finance. 2, micro loan. 3, SMEs loan. 3 and 4, startup loan. In the personal finance product, it's between 500 shillings and 50,000 shillings and will be available for lending. It will be repaid in 14 days and the 8% interest will be calculated pro rata on a daily basis. The other revolutionary aspect of the fund is the savings component. Every time you borrow, 5% of that amount goes to a savings scheme where the money earns interest. In addition, for every 2 shillings saved, the government adds a bob. This, of course, will boost national savings and also provide those who borrow from the Hustlers Fund some cushion for a rainy day. The fund is working with the leading mobile network operators, Safaricom, Airtel, and Telcom, to deliver the funds. They are also setting up a joint call center that will disseminate information and respond to issues and questions of borrowers. So that's one. Let me take you to the financial inclusion regulations that were published by the National Treasury. On the part of who qualifies, who's eligible to borrow from the fund, further to the eligibility criteria in these regulations, an eligible person may qualify for a loan under these regulations. 1, where that person is a natural person, human being. 1, a loan, kiumbe.
A what being?
A
Human.
natural person,
Natural person as opposed to what exactly?
GMO.
as opposed to a company
Okay.
or another entity.
And by the way, a company by law, as in a limited company by law, is also a person.
It's a
but
citizen, but it's not a natural person.
What about carry on?
Okay.
Yes.
Where that person is a natural person, for example, Charles Timothy, that person must be 18 years of age and above. That person must be a holder of a Kenyan national ID. They must fulfill other conditions as may be determined by the board. If you are not a natural human being, so you are a micro, small and medium enterprise, Sacco society, a chama, a group, a table banking group or any other association, then all your members must be 18 years of age. You must be registered by the relevant government institution. You must meet other conditions. Those are the conditions and eligibility criteria. BILLOW, you're shaking your head.
No, you see, that's why I said this thing will not be as successful as Kenya Kwanza would think.
Why?
For the same reasons that they have given there. When you start, and I gave you a reason why all the other funds, by the way, have not succeeded. It's because of the requirements for registration, for eligibility, accessibility. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. The whole thing why people are ready to pay 30, 40, 50% interest on this other funds. It's because of the accessibility. I want to buy my mboga today, so I get it immediately. By afternoon, I have used it. Tomorrow, I can pay it back. But this one, you have to register. You must be this, you must be that, you must be this, you must be that. Of course, they try to argue that they're not. They'll probably change that. I have a feeling that I don't think they would really.
But it sounds very easy for me. For that natural human being, all you need is to be a Kenyan citizen. And if you're working with the telecom companies,
how do you demonstrate you're a Kenyan citizen on this phone?
If you're working with the telco companies, you are registered
Yeah.
with Safaricom, you're registered with Airtel Money, you're registered with Telcom. All right? So they've already done that due diligence and known that you are a natural human being with an ID and you're Kenyan.
Yeah, so that's why they said earlier there is no need for registration. In fact, I think the same minister, when he was giving the statement, he did make it very clear that there will be no requirement for registration as long as
As long as you have a mobile phone.
Yes, so I don't think they want to go through any technical things that would make things very difficult. But let me tell you, but in my view, the objective really of this fund was not just this 30,000 shillings. I think that's why people liked it. They thought it's going to support businesses.
Indeed.
You have your little studio here, you're setting up your TV, you need 1 million shillings. You can't access it from banks. And so people are thinking of businesses that's what you call businesses. People are not thinking of this individual. Once you personalize it and make it individual, apart from that requirement which is available on the phone, the registration and so forth, all the others you cannot demonstrate. You cannot demonstrate I'm going to buy it with mboga. You cannot demonstrate I'm going to use it for my school fees. Or I'm going to give to my friend.
I think, Billow, the messaging by Kenya Kwanza was addressing exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
That for a very long time, people in this country have thought of business people as those ones who are doing big things, they are employing many people, and they've forgotten the hustler. That's why they kept saying, huyu mama mboga, huyu jamaa wa boda boda, not hawa watu, not hii kampuni, huyu mtu. And so
to
that's
make
it's individual.
as easily as accessible to the person who would naturally not be able to access it.
Patrick
They didn't
explain
they didn't have
that category. There hasn't been much of a vacuum.
They already sorted.
Not already sorted, but there isn't a vacuum. I mean, you'll have to compete with all the other funds that are already
And is that
already
not
there.
what then they wanted
But let me
to
tell
do?
you, KIPRA, this government body, they did a study last year. You remember? They said 86% of all the small businesses in this country, they get their funding mainly through families and friends. They have no access to banks. Their funding. And that is the reason why. And let me tell you, when you talk of small business, when you talk of company, it's because if you are now applying for a small tender in a company or in government, most probably you'll be asked to register. You must have a company. And the company doesn't mean those big companies. It means, but for you to go through all those things, the requirements are quite. So I think the issue really for me is, yes, you're going to give money to those people, but it's not going to achieve that objective of creating wealth, creating employment, giving startups, expanding businesses. That expansion of business by 20,000, in my view, it's not what people are looking for.
What would the intent behind all of this be? Because for me, it strikes me as a bit bizarre that those behind the creation of this idea, maybe some of the best economic minds in the country, standing behind this idea. So for you to see something, so plainly you've explained it in 3 minutes, and I've been able to see, okay, actually, it wouldn't lift somebody from poverty to wealth. This 30,000 shillings wouldn't be able to do that. 20,000 shillings wouldn't be able to do that unless it was a recurrent, continuous injection of this capital, right? Why wouldn't they see that, though? Or was there a different intent?
I think I said we are making a huge assumption. And these are policy assumption. We assume these guys, they are not having a form of access. Now, let's go to the border guys. They're already organized, we know that. And they're moving money among themselves.
They are.
But they're not anywhere in the formal sector. Now, we also need to go back and look at history. it's not that we have not had funds that have had a huge impact. Now, there's one that is not being talked about here. You will reflect back to 2003 when President Kibaki, the late president, came into office. He created a fund. The fund that they were giving SMEs. And the fund was only 6 billion, which was channeled through mainstream banks. And I think that time the key actors was Equity. That time it was Building Society. Then Family Bank was coming up and KCB. Now, if you go and look at that fund, the government was giving like a line of credit to those particular selected banks at 4%, and they were on lending at 6%. Now, within no time, the banks had even created their own matching fund because it was a huge uptake and it has a huge impact. And it's one of the products that actually revolutionized the banking sector. Before then, we never even used to have these things we call unsecured loans. But the moment they moved into that particular space, because that time the conventional banking was SMEs are not bankable in terms of credit. So this particular fund, and we go back and trace it, it had a huge impact. Now, coming to the Hustler Fund and the other existing funds, is it the cheapest? No. Because you need to go and look at the products that Youth Fund is giving, you go and look at the products that Women Funds are giving, and the products with WESO Fund. For example, you go to most of the Youth Fund and Women Fund products, they do not charge interest per se. They charge a management fee, which is about 5%. Now, when they do the LPO financing, they don't charge interest. They take a commission of that product, and it's cumulatively about 6.5%. So when you're saying this is be the cheapest product
At 8%.
yes, it's not factually true. It is not the cheapest product we've had for the country. But for me, I think the biggest challenge we need to, and the Hustler Fund has to speak to, is the competitiveness in that sector. Now, I don't imagine that the banks and the microfinance institutions and the finance institutions will sit back and watch government plug into their
turf.
space. Because they're making a lot of money. They're making a lot of money from this one-off. So if we are going to compete in that space, then we must give something that is very competitive. Now, for me, and probably going to the question you had raised, when the hustlers were campaigning, that thing seemed to pick traction with the masses. But we need to go back and ask, what was the mindset of the voter at that point in time? You see, our campaigns are based on handouts and freebies. So to the hustlers, this was free money that was coming from.
It wasn't going to be a loan.
Yes, it was going to be a
It was
loan.
supposed to be free money.
It was supposed to be free
It was
money.
supposed to be a grant.
Yes.
Free.
Yes. So to them,
That's how it started.
to
Those
them,
were first words, indeed.
yes, to them, and when they were voting because they are going to access free money. And around the campaign period, they're also getting free money. Now, one of the biggest challenges.
Wait. It was supposed to be a grant.
Yes.
Like money you receive and you don't even return.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
even a
that's
loan
the
at zero
direct
interest.
option.
Eric, that's
It's
what
a
a
liable
grant
fee.
is, a freebie.
Free,
It's a freebie.
Yes.
So to the hustlers, it was to be a
Kwani mimi
freebie.
nilikuwa nchi gani?
And we need to see the challenge with WESO Fund is largely the political interest. Because WESO Fund is largely under the members of parliament within their constituencies, and they have a lot of influence. And they're the ones who go and distribute the checks. They actually participate in the distribution of the checks. Now, if you go to the village and you're giving people the check, and the MP is the one who is giving, to them, it's free money.
It's MP
They're not
who's
meant to be
giving you
paid
the money.
back. So in the mind of the hustler, hii ni pesa ya serikali ya bure. And if you look at the WESO Fund, actually the collection, they've said they've only been able to collect 2.65 billion out of the 7 billion, which is translated to about 40% of repayment for the last almost 11
9
years or 9 years or thereabout. So if you're going to cushion the hustler fund from that particular trap, then you have to divorce it from the political process. For me, there are windows that they can utilize to make the fund effective. And the way BILLOW is saying, to the real hustler that they have in mind, it may not make impact to the economy. Because part of the regulation, you also need to look at where they're talking about the qualitative aspect of the fund, where they're supposed to improve the quality of access to credit, the quality of pricing products and all that. The fund is also supposed to speak to that. It's also supposed to speak to the saving culture of the people.
Yep.
So you cannot have all these things packaged together in a
20,000
single borrowing package.
It's
It
too
doesn't make
much.
sense. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Two, we need to go back and look at how have they structured this organization. Now, this organization is put on a board of 7 members. 4 of them, the majority, are representatives of the ministry.
Yeah.
You see? So
Direct
these people are not,
appointees
yes,
of-
these people are not coming there to bring competence in terms of skill set and all that. They are nominated by the principal secretary to represent them, and they are the majority in that particular. Now, look at the secretariat, how it's established. Actually, it's a bit of a departure from the other state corporations, because in this case, the board does not have automatic right to establish the secretariat. They will need to nominate people to be appointed by the by the PS actually.
They nominate
by the
people
CS.
who will then be
Appointed by the CS.
whose position will be determined by the PS.
CS.
The CS.
CS.
CS, the
CS
cabinet
for
secretary.
cooperative and SMEs.
Minister.
Yes.
Okay.
But
And
is that different from the other ministries?
No,
Like-
in state corporations, the people are employees of the
of the board.
board. So apart from probably the CEO who is nominated and then recruited or nominated by the CS.
So this
here-
one says everybody else, not just the CEO.
The secretariat, yes. So the board will nominate people who will be appointed by the CS. So that's a bit of a unique departure. But also there's
Is
something
that
they are
a
not.
good or a bad departure?
It's a bad because now technically you put these people under. You see, the CS is a political appointee.
So the CS puts people into the board and then tells the board, give me names of the people that I shall appoint.
Yes.
So
To the
essentially, the
secretariat.
CS is deciding everything.
Yes. And then there's something they have not cured about the Women and Youth Fund. You see, the CEOs of these particular institutions, the Women Fund, the Youth Fund, and the Western Fund, are not accounting officers. Now, in government, that means a lot of things.
So who is the accounting officer?
An accounting officer is the person who is in charge, has full authority over the day-to-day administration of the fund. Now, the regulations are conspicuously silent of whether the CEO will be the accounting officer. So they've not declared. And normally when we have state corporations, the CEO is exclusively declared to be the accounting officer. Now, here they'll be conveniently silent, the same way with the other funds. So if you're not declared the
Can I just
accounting-
hold it?
Yes.
Just explain. We are informed that PSs are accounting officers.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Now, the accounting officer in law, in government, you are the person who is in charge of the resources of that institution.
Meaning?
So meaning that all procurement and any contract and any money that moves out of that institution is with your signatory. So money cannot move out without your signature. So that's an accounting officer. Now, in government, this has to be exclusively determined in the law. Now, if you go to the Youth Fund and the Women Fund, the CEOs are not the accounting officer. Now, they depend on the PS. You see? So you become now like an AIE holder. So if the law has not
What's
exclusively
an AIE
defined
holder?
authority to incur expenditure, it means that you're given
There's a
particular
limit.
budget line by the PS.
And there's a law that allows you to be able to expend this money.
Yeah, no, you are now dependent. If you're not the accounting officer,
Yes.
it means that the accounting officer is the PS.
Yes.
So you are directly under the control.
So who gives you this authority to
Law.
to-
So the law
gives-
needs to exclusively
Give you
determine
the-
and declare you as an accounting officer
and that is what gives you now the authority to
to be in
expend.
charge of all the resources of that particular department. So what this means is, if we go ahead with this fund without exclusively determining the CEO of the fund to be the accounting officer, what it means that is they will still be dependent on the PS for the purpose of spending that particular.
So
money.
essentially-
Wendy, let me ask you,
Yeah.
does it doesn't matter to the hustlers,
Yeah.
to the disbursement of the fund, the existence of a board and who is an
Those are
authority.
details.
Those things are not important. And actually, the moment they go in that route,
Yeah.
then it creates more problems, because this thing, in my view, the reason why I find this fund completely, being relevant is this money. All the government needed to do is give it to Fuliza.
Give it to
I have 50
Safaricom and
billion.
tell Safaricom.
Yes.
On
Disburse
land.
it the same way you are disbursing.
Yeah.
But you form a board, you create all those things and institutions. Nobody's going to go there. Nobody's going to deal with them. Accountability, how they will use the money. Now, the moment you create those institutions, it means part of that 10-50 billion.
It's going to go
Yes.
to
It
Admin
goes to
cost.
that administration.
Yes,
They've
yes,
already
yes.
indicated how much percentage, but it you might find difficulty in getting the money released. Then it comes to the issue of Treasury has no money, and this is why they have removed the cap. This morning you said in the news they are saying the 50 billion they're no longer mentioning. They said it to be determined by Parliament.
Yes.
They can say, okay, this year we are putting only 30 billion because of lack of funding. So for me, this 50,000 shillings, they should have just left it
50 billion.
50 billion shillings. They should just give it, no, the 50,000 cap.
Oh, cap.
They should just give this money to one of these platforms and let it run with only one specification
As
that
a
instead
lender.
of
Yes,
and let it
yes.
run as a lender.
let them just, because last year Kibaki and not Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta, he launched another fund.
Credit
It's
guarantee
called
scheme.
Biashara Kenya Fund. You remember?
Yeah.
Yes.
Biashara Kenya Fund is at 6%, and it was 2.5 billion.
Yeah.
The uptake is negligible if you look at what has happened. The same year, 2020, Uhuru also launched another one called Credit Guarantee Scheme,
Yep.
a 12 billion shilling fund, where the government will guarantee 25% of any lending to small and micro enterprises by banks.
Yeah.
As at last month, I saw the reporting about 3-4 billion is what the uptake has been in 3 years. So in all of these things, you find the challenge has been, one, the eligibility requirements, and two, the other requirements, for registration, for accessibility is difficult. This is why people are not able to access. In this thing, let me tell you, my argument has been, and I've written extensively on this the last 2-3 months, this fund should have been a grant. It should not have been a loan, absolutely. Because the most developed countries in the world, like US, they have grants. US has got grants of up to 75,000 for kiosks. And those small businesses, farms on the streets and so forth, they give those kind of grants. If you go to countries in Europe, they give 100% guarantee to loans up to now, especially after COVID. Several countries, France and Switzerland, many of them, they give 100% guarantee. If you take a loan, a small business, and the banks give you the money, the government will guarantee. Up to 100%. Some countries up to 60-70%. But my argument is, why can't the government simply, because the biggest challenge facing this small and micro enterprises, this is where 80% of Kenyans are in terms of employment and so forth. These are the people you find in all those buildings in town, with small offices, photocopying guys, running a small office, hair salon. These are people who need the 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, 500. These are the people who need support. These are the people who cannot access money from banks because the banks are biased. It's not because of any other reason, by the way. If you look at the CBK report last year, they said 20% of the total lending by all the banks in Kenya went to MSCs, SMEs. 20%, about 640 billion is what SMEs borrowed, 20%. But at the same time, the non-performing loans out of the total portfolio, the total non-performing loans for small is also around 20%. In other words, in fact, they are the most compliant, according to the CBK, in terms of, because of the strict requirements for you to access money if you are a small. And let me tell you, in my view, governments are the ones that are making people poor in Africa. Because in this country and others in Africa, we have assets, but we cannot collateralize our assets. We cannot use them as security. You have land in Kakamega, you have land in Busia, you have land in Mandera. You have no security, it has no title. If it has issues that can never be resolved, if there's small, I'm telling you, the Western countries, the reason why these guys talk about those, GDPs and so forth, every inch of that country can be used as a collateral.
As a collateral for something.
You have a serious problem in this town alone. Forget about going anywhere. To get your property, to use it as a collateral in a bank is a nightmare. But you go to other countries, you use your furniture in your room. If this is your studio, this can be used as a collateral to access funding in any country in the West. Everything you use, your car, try to get money through your logbook now in a bank in Kenya. Tell them you want to take a small taxi, loan. You want to buy a taxi, a rider, yeah? I want to take 500,000. Go to a bank and see whether they'll give you. You'll struggle. But look, the reason why people go to the Shylocks is because I just put a logbook and collect the money.
Yeah.
This is why people are going into these things, because of the accessibility. There, it's because of the bias. The banks simply have that mentality that if you're small, you don't deserve it. Even the free money, let me give you, I'll finish on this. If Charles, even the free money.
Yes.
If you are big, you get free money. if you run some of the largest corporations in this country, they get free money through what they call capital allowances. You get tax incentives. If you are not doing very well, you got a bailout, whether you're a KQ or a Kenya Pipeline or a Kenya Power or whatever company, even if it's owned by state only in a certain fraction. You get bailouts, you get assistance, you get funding of so many types, But if you are small, to be given 50,000, it's a big deal.
You're already small and struggling. and
It's a big deal. The president would go on media and say, "There's no free money, my friend." But I have my 10,000 acres of tea. I want fertilizer. I'm giving subsidy, 3,000 shillings. I'm giving subsidy. That's free money. But if you run your little shoe shine, 10,000 shillings is a big deal. And you're running away with 10,000 shillings. There's no free money. So I think it's misplaced. I really think it's totally misplaced.
Let's go into the news, and then we come back and continue this conversation for just a couple of more minutes as then we wind up and hear. So what is it that we should expect to get from this fund? What is it that people should demand from the government? There are promises that were made. The Hustler Fund is about to be launched. The regulations are out. The information is out. There's some disconnect that is appearing from what they said and what they're saying now, from what they promised and what they're about to deliver. Keep it here for more conversations. Dr. Patrick Mwinde, economist, and BILLOW KERROW, also an economist and financial expert, former chair of the Senate Finance and Budget Committee, are our guest this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
As we're going to the break, BILLOW was very, very serious on this and saying this Hustler Fund should have been a what? A grant. Should have been free money, not loan with interest and all. Do you agree with him?
Not absolutely. Because one, this government money. And if we are spending government money, there's the other side of, I think, what the Hustler Fund they're also talking about. And they're talking about stimulating the economy and speaking about the revenue side of the economy. So we are spending 50 billion. In a way, this should be seen as an investment. But also, I have a feeling that we need to turn it to be a revolving fund that is able to take a life of its own and grow on its own and expand.
Okay.
Because in as much as we are allocating taxpayers' money into this, then we need to also ask on the other side of the equation, where does the money come from? And that's why I referred back to the 6 billion fund that was created by the former President Kibaki. If you look at the impact that fund had into the economy and the explosion with the SME subsector and the subsequent employment levels and all that, because hustlers also need to solve the problem of unemployment. And unemployment is not just about the job. We also need to think about the quality of the job. So that this fund leaders to create not only jobs, but also quality jobs. And that's why I'm feeling there's a component they proposed there, the on-lending, which the commercial bank are supposed to access, probably at a better competitive interest rate and on lend. So for me, this fund can be we call them segregated and create different products targeting different components of the economy. Number one, if we need to put a good fund on the actual SMEs, these are the SMEs that have a huge turnover that can employ maybe 50, 100 people. We need to create a window for them to be able to access this particular fund. Because these guys who create jobs, they are already within the tax system, so you know who they are. You can trace them, and when they make money, you also will be able to get them to pay the taxes. But also, as we target these hustlers, assuming now you are looking at the Mama Mboka down there, now the challenge you have had for so many years is that these guys are nowhere in the financial economic system. Now, are they moving money? Yes.
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are.
Because if you go to Kikomba and all these Malikiti, you go to Mombasa, Kongowea, and all these places, these guys are moving a lot of cash.
Yep.
But they are nowhere in the financial system. So if this fund, it can be a double-edged strategy where you give them access to funding, but also you start finding a way of moving them into the
getting
formal
into
side
the-
of the
into the-
economy. Because you need to generate money to pay our loans, you need to pay government bills, you need also to invest back in the infrastructure. So if we make it a perpetual free grant, and also it's like we keep on pushing the notion that there's some free money somewhere. Okay, the reality right now is there's a problem, but we cannot continue to enhance the problem through the fund.
Sure.
So if you're using the fund, let's use the fund to find a solution, and a solution to moving these people from the informal sector to the formal sector. It cannot be right for an economy of Kenya size and structure, to be talking about 83% informal. Informal can never be a strategy for economic growth. And if we don't solve that problem, and we are creating this fund, let's create funds that move us to the formal side of the economy.
And moving to the formal side of the economy, essentially, moving to the formal side of the economy essentially is what? Being banked, being taxed,
Yes.
and being recognized by, the regulatory authorities that this business exists.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking
essentially
about.
being in the system.
Yes.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying, when it can be a double strategy for the purpose of the government, because you see, for all these years we've grown in the formal sector, but the challenge with the informal sector, one, it's very hard to regulate them, and part of the reason why the ASLA fund will have a challenge of identifying the actual beneficiary is because they're informal.
How do you then do this? And this is the thing, that one of the ways to do. I mean, if you're working in a formal. In the formal sector, of course, the structure within which you work then, of course, almost guarantees that you will be, number one, found and regulated.
Yes.
This other side of the divide is all over the place. And I think for a lot of people, and maybe that could be the struggle, how do you do that? The thousands of people who are working in informal structure, like we talked about, the person who's selling vegetables, the person who has a polishing stand, the person who how do you start to find all of these people and put them together? Because essentially that is the conversation we're having. We could have a conversation where we talk about, right, okay, so there's a politicized conversation whereby there was a promise that was made to people whereby there's some free money coming your way. But the truth of the matter, maybe an underbelly of this conversation truly is that you have an unregulated number of businesses that could contribute significantly to the country's economy. But that's not happening because we cannot find them.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah,
we know they're there, but literally we cannot find them.
Yeah, you remember the statistics BILLOW gave? It said we have 7.5 estimated MSEs in Kenya is 7.56 million. The ones that are registered, if you go to the KMA website, they say it's about 1.5. Now, these guys operate in the darkness in terms of the economy speak. And that's what I'm saying. If you're using the ASLA fund, one, they'll be the needy people who need that free money. They are there in the economy, so we cannot wish them away. But let's create products that help us, one, to help the fund continue to expand. And who is this group of people? They're the people who are already in a formal kind of setup
Sure.
that cannot probably access the funding in banks, or it is expensive for them to access that funding. For example, you can go to SME, the one that are doing a turnover of say 50 million or 100 million, and then go to the bank and they borrow at 15% or 16%. Now, if you're giving them a loan at 6%, that's a huge injection of capital to them. And it has a lot of impact to them, because now the tax, the interest depreciation is a big product for them. Now, these guys will help you to grow the fund. You can also find those other small SMEs, and this is the challenge now the ASLA fund will also have, is because one, they are okay operating in the darkness. You see?
I mean,
So you're giving them this fund, and you're telling them, we want to bring you on the light. And on the light means that you need to start knowing your income.
Yeah.
You need to start filing your tax returns.
Yeah.
You need to tell us how much you made and how much you see. And this is where you remember I think there was the 1.5 tax that was being targeted to this kind of group businesses, and it brought a lot of problems. So this is a challenge the fund is going to experience, Because now we give us the money, then you make us known. You make us, you bring us to the light of KERROW. And we don't want that. So this is a competition they're going to have. But in terms of policy level, you must find a way of moving people from the informal. You cannot run a country with 85%.
That's all
informal.
good, but can you find another way in just balancing the same? The same thing that Bill was saying, big investors are given free money by government.
Yes.
Whether you call it investment deduction, allowance, whatever we call it, there's going to be some rebate here because you're doing business in the country. And it runs in the tunes of millions of shillings. The person who is that Mamamboga is also doing business in the country. Now you're supporting them. Can't you find a way of giving them a rebate? It can be a condition.
You can. You see, apart from the financial support, there are 9 financial barriers to small businesses. Huge. And this is one of the things that the president spoke to when he was campaigning. That they will make Kazi, that story of Kazi came from that. That they will allow businesses to thrive without a lot of regulatory restrictions. And this is, and so if you want to start your small M-Pesa shop in Nairobi now, the amount of inspections you go through, you know, the NEMAs and the city councils and the health and the what, and you pay money for different licenses. You try opening a small business in Nairobi. And this happens everywhere. So there are a lot of challenges which the government can remove. Then you come to taxation. The environment is so unattractive, even to the big businesses, that many big businesses have relocated to other countries in the region. So the small ones, you are giving them the same tax environment, you know, which makes it, again, very difficult. You know, you earn $1 million shillings from your little saloon, and the government wants 30% of that. And the 30% is the highest. Where the president was in Korea, the government, by law, and this is something we've been asking government to do, Central Bank is so proud to announce every year that the banks have made so much profit. This year, for example, 9 months, this week, you know, the banks have made 33 billion, 30 billion, 36 billion, 9 months only.
In just 9
By
months.
the time they finish the year, it will be clocking 40 billion. Government is very proud to announce that. But they don't ask the bank, you're a business. You want a license? Yes, okay. Give 30% of all your loans to SMEs by law. If you can't do, sorry, I can't give you a license. You want a license here, give 20% of all your money to agriculture. Invest. I mean, unless the government really, through policy, directs people to, you know, where they can invest in terms of the banks and so forth. So if you go to where he was in Korea, you cannot just compare Korea to us because by policy they're different. For example, 45% of all their lendings by their banks go to SMEs. Actually, in Asia, minimum 35% of the money, any bank, you must give it to SMEs.
By policy.
And they have banks for the government, like Korea, the Industrial Bank of South Korea. It gives up to 90% of their lending is for SMEs. Here we set up these things once upon a time. We had ICDC. It was funding the big hotels and the big businesses and the big shops. They were given equity, through equity participation, through asset financing, through whatever. You know, they were financed. All these tycoons here now, they were financed through government money. You're saying there's no free money. There's all free money. There was AFC to assist finance agriculture. If you were to start a business, but today it's only the big farms and the big guys who are getting access to that money. There is Industrial Development Bank. You try to, so the big businesses have opportunities.
It was
But
KIE
small
that dealt
businesses,
with the medium-sized
they
businesses,
don't. And
yes.
the other countries are giving small businesses other ways of support through reduction of taxes, give them low levels of taxes. Why must I pay the same 30%? My business is $1 million shillings income,
As somebody who's
profit, or 5 million,
100
10 million
times
shillings.
that,
And another guy is running 100 billion, I pay the same 30%. And even our tax, by the way, it's a disincentive because it's the highest in the region. Our corporation tax of 30% is higher than all the other countries in Africa. South Africa, one of the richest, is 28%.
Indeed.
The closest that come to us is like Ghana, whatever, 25. Egypt, a powerhouse now in commerce, is 22%. Other countries don't even talk about it. The same thing with other payee taxes. So we, as a government, our problem is we want to take all the money and then determine what we want to do. What we want to do is always those roads. And you don't want to,
even those have a problem.
even those are the problems. So when you are losing, as a president, you stand up and you say, we are losing 2 billion daily to crooks. It's not a big deal.
So question.
But when
very
you are
plainly
giving
then,
2 billion, 2 million to this
To
poor,
the small person.
it's a big deal.
it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So then, very plainly, the question is on this hustler fund, as we see unraveling the way in which it is. Do we bank on it or give up on it?
Bank on it in the sense it's not going to turn around the economy, or it's not going to change the lives of, all those people who are looking for access to funding, the SMEs. But it's just as well. Let them have it. But I don't think, in my view, I'm just looking at the figures here published in today's. M-Shwari alone has 31.9 million customers. This is on your papers.
Yep.
You didn't write it. Fuliza has 17.1 million customers. Look at that. And the amount of loans, they have disbursed. M-Shwari alone, 181 million loans. I mean, and
Million loans. We're not talking about million shillings. It's
no
important.
loans.
Yes,
No,
yes,
the
million
amount
loans.
of shillings is hundreds of billions.
It's billions.
Yeah.
It's like you take today, tomorrow you pay back. Next
You
week want to
take
collect
that
it, you collect.
evening.
It's non-stop. So if you want to do this, in my view, I think it's misplaced as a government. You don't need to compete with these guys. Let these guys do. Give them some support. Give them some money. Tell them, okay, put in this into your to whatever 50 every year. I give you 50 billion. Put it in your and give it out. But reduce on condition you reduce your charge rates to the same way they did the other day. But let me focus on other things. How to assist this guy open his own studio with 5 million. Competitively, there are many areas where the government needs to support. In farming, agriculture is 80% of the country. Are they getting any loans? Their lands is not collateral. They cannot be used. You cannot work on lands ministry to make things easy for people so that we can all collateralize our assets and use them. Why is it difficult for NTSA, these guys who look after logbooks? Sometimes you buy a car, you might wait for a year before your logbook comes out and you can't use it easily. So, I mean, there are many ways in which you can assist things to make people access funding. But in my view, there are a lot of things the government can do, really, instead of just standing up, giving you 50 billion. It's a big deal now. We're going to make a party.
There are better things for the government to
make
do.
a party out of it.
Probably what BILLOW KERROW is saying, we need to get this very correct. Now, we said there's a need. But the question is, how then do we implement this fund? Now, we are saying the commercial bank, the financial institutions are already experts in it. So let's give them a line of credit and let's give them access at a discounted rate, probably 1.5 or 2%. Then give them the window to grant withdrawn between maybe 4 and 8% what they have capped based on the customer ability. Now, in a market economy like ours, the government has no business doing business where the market is already effective. So we know who we are targeting. We do not have the platform, we do not have the infrastructure, we do not have the ability to compete.
Because did I hear you say that the money should be given to financial institutions?
Yes, they have the competence.
They do have the competence, but there's a big but here. Are they not going to apply the same rules and regulations that they normally apply?
No, you see, if you're giving them the government component gets certain preferential because you're giving out the conditions. You come with the conditions under which they'll need to loan that money. And that's what I'm saying. If you look at the 6 billion I've kept on talking about, it is a huge impact because you see now you're creating a state corporation to go and compete.
Give me an example of where this has worked and where, even within our country, where the government has put money in the banking system, the commercial banking system, and how it has been rolled out successfully.
By the way, the 6 billion that Kibaki gave is actually the one that built Equity Bank, the Family Bank. They actually moved a huge component. And you see, if you look at like even the banks now are even creating products to actually in anticipation of this product to compete. I think it's 2 weeks ago when KCB said they're putting about 250 billion and they're targeting that space of women groups. So you see, if you have a state corporation that will have to deal with the Public Financial Management Act, the Procurement Act, and they're competing in this space where the private sector is already very effective. Because, and I think BILLOW KERROW has kept on saying, the problem with these guys is not ability to pay. They are paying up to 20%, they are paying up to 30%. Because the microfinance institution are already giving them money, and they give them at 25% or even 30%.
Yes, they do.
So they are doing that. So you are giving them now this particular capitation of government. You now allow the bank conditions now on how they lend.
So you're saying that this will ease accessibility?
Already, let me tell you, from the time we were kids, these banks receive money from governments
Yes, they have.
to lend, to
Yes.
on lend, to
Yes.
Yeah, that's normal, and they don't receive from governments of that country. They receive from World Bank, IFC,
AFDB.
so many. They are getting it daily. They're getting money. They're told this money is for SMEs. We're giving you $2 billion. They get it at a very, very concessional rate of 1%. But of course, then they give it the way they want.
Yeah.
But that's workable. That's workable. I think what we were saying is in terms of efficiency, it would be better for government to take that kind of an arrangement than to start forming a board to start
Instead of
running
creating a whole new entity.
This Fuliza is, and these things are so successful. You can now see they're saying it's expanding to DRC, Ghana, Ethiopia, Tanzania, all those
It's
countries.
working.
You know, I'm in
Gentlemen.
agreement completely. You see, the question I am raising here is, yes, when you put it into the formal system, you then come against the headwinds of the formality that these institutions have. Now, when I ask for the example,
Condition, he said conditional.
yes,
The government will come with their
I
own.
agree.
Yeah.
Government always says that. Do the banks comply? And I'm asking the example where they have complied with it. You see, if it's given to say a specific financial institution like agricultural finance in the days when it existed, or it was given to ICDC, already the conditions were understood. But you're talking about the commercial banking sector. Do we have examples where money has been given and the concessionary rate that you're talking about, stipulated by the government, has been adhered to?
2013. Okay.
I talked about the 2003
Kibaki,
6
Kibaki
billion.
one.
And it was a huge impact.
Kenya Mortgage
Because
Refinance Company.
what the government did was to pre-qualify financial institutions. And what they do, there are two things that happen. One, once you give them the seed capital, they are likely going to create also a product that is also related to that, because they also competed in that space. And that's what happened. Like in 2013, once they finished the grant from, 2003, once they finished the grant from government, the 6 billion, they actually created a product that was around 8%, most of the banks. So you could actually go there and they tell you the government kitty is over. But now we have ours,
We have
which
a
is
product.
8%. You see, to the borrower and to the person who is in business, if their business is moving money, they have no problem. The problem is the conditions for them to access that money. If I go to Fuliza in the morning, I go and shop, I find a product worth 6,000. I don't have the cash. What do? I Fuliza and I pay immediately and I go. You see, if the banks have these products, and you see now it helps you, one, to know, to bring these guys into a formality. Two, it removes the notion that this is government money, because I'm going to a financial institution. So that helps you a lot in terms of the repayment and the compliance. And then I'm giving the statistics of Weso Fund. If I pick a check and the check is from the
From an
member
MP.
of parliament, in my mind,
Free.
it's government money. And government money
It's
is
free
free money. So if you put them through the form of financial system at good rates, because what we need now, the government need to do is to regulate how this money is spent.
Spend is best.
But also the 2%, the line of credit I'm talking about, either 1.5% or 2%, it helps you to grow the kitty so that you are not perpetually be held
Sinking
to keep on
money into it.
putting money in it.
28
So allow
minutes
the
to
fund
10.
to grow. Yeah.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Asanteni sana for this conversation. Let's see what they launch and what they say. We'll invite you again to come and we review. After 30 days, after the public comes out, hii pesa iko wapi?
Okay.
Or pesa imekuja inasaidia. But Dr. Patrick Mwinde and BILLOW KERROW, asanteni sana for joining us today.
Thank you so much.